Buenas and half a day. Thank you all for being here today. The Committee on Education, Air Transportation, and Statistics Research and Planning will now convene this virtual hearing. This virtual roundtable hearing and followed by a virtual informational briefing. Today is July 2nd, 2020, and it is currently 9:06 in the morning. For the record and in accordance with the Open Government Law, public notice was sent out via email to all senators, stakeholders, and all main media broadcasting outlets on Tuesday, June 16, 2020, and the second notice on Tuesday, June 30th, 2020. Notice of today's virtual confirmation hearing was also available on the Guam Legislature's website. Joining me today are my colleagues, Senator Amanda Shelton, Legislative Secretary, Senator Mary Camacho Torres, and thank you, Senators, for being here. Before we proceed with the virtual roundtable hearing and informational briefing, the Legislature has general rules of conduct that must be followed. The general rules of conduct. All must abide by the rules of conduct and quality assurance standards. Please keep video on at all times and ensure you are in a room with little interruptions and adequate lighting, specifically to make sure the participant's face is visible at all times. The host of this hearing will mute participants until called upon the chair. When called to speak, please ensure that you are unmuted and that you are speaking into your microphone. Members of the committee wishing to speak may indicate via the in-app feature chat box. And so that's the chat box below on the bottom of the screen. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking and shall state their name for record-keeping purposes. The order of questioning will begin with the panel of senators who shall complete their lines of questioning for each respective item on the agenda. Upon completion of the panel's line of questioning, the chair will pose questions. Each member will be allowed to pose a question to an individual testifying for a round and will be provided another round if needed. Questions and testimonies shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violations of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the informational hearing by the host. Roundtable and informational hearing by the host. So we will start first with the first item on the agenda, which is the roundtable hearing. Today, I have called this virtual roundtable hearing to provide the people of Guam an update on the Guam Department of Education's institutional framework as it relates to areas for improving educational programs and services to all students. Today's virtual roundtable hearing will be focused on addressing the unique needs of students with autism spectrum disorder. Every child's quality of education must be designed to enable the child to be involved in and make progress in the general education curriculum, which is the same curriculum for non-disabled children. The United States Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs Dear Colleague Letter serves to provide significant guidance for schools and other agencies to clarify their responsibility under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA. IDEA is to provide children with disabilities appropriate behavioral interventions and support necessary to ensure meaningful access to their education. IDEA requires each state and entity to provide a free, appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities. In addition, the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Andrew F. versus Douglas County School District, Andrew F. clarified the substantive standard for determining whether the child's individual education program, which is also known as the IEP, is sufficient to confer educational benefit on a child with a disability. Today's virtual roundtable hearing will provide discussions on the Guam Department of Education's current behavioral intervention and expectations, independent educational evaluation contract status, implementation of formal behavioral assessment and behavior intervention, and the implementation of training models in the classroom to address the unique needs of students with autism spectrum disorder. I hope that everyone at home listening will better understand Guam Department of Education's plans and measures towards providing the equal learning opportunities to every student on Guam. I'd like to begin with the Guam Department of Education Superintendent, and I'd like to acknowledge him at this time, and also the chairwoman of the board, Mrs. Gutierrez. If you, Superintendent, if you could please introduce everyone here, and I believe you have a presentation for us, and then we will have members of the community be given an opportunity to speak once the presentation is completed, and then we'll begin our questions after. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Vice Speaker and members of the committee. Now we do have quite a number of representatives from the department to participate not only in this roundtable but also for the following informational briefing on this coming school year. But specific to this particular issue, let me just go ahead and in addition, recognizing our board member, Chairwoman Ms. Gutierrez, we do have as well Ms. Lou Beneventi, who is in charge of curriculum and instruction in terms of the committee work on the board. I know Mr. Mark Mendiola and Ms. Carla Borja are also online. They are both members of the board, but are also the former and the current representative of parents on our board, as well as parents of children receiving special services as well, and have been very helpful in guiding us in terms of giving us input as to how we can improve our services. In terms of our staff, I do want to recognize Deputy Superintendent Kelly Sokola. At this time, we do have Deputy Joe Sanchez and Deputy Erica Cruz as well. But Deputy Superintendent Kelly Sokola is directly responsible in charge of and oversees the Special Education Division, which is headed by Assistant Superintendent Yolanda Gabriel, who is present here, and supported by her staff, which includes Tricia Taitagui, who is online, Kathy Taidinko, Laura Taisapik, and I believe Therese Crisostomo is here as well, and also Tom Babauta. So they are representing our Special Education Division. And let me also recognize Jesse Nassis, who is in our legal division, who assists the department in helping to resolve any disputes or complaints that arise out of these matters. So I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to provide some testimony and to participate in this discussion. What I'd like to do is just provide a short statement, and then if I could ask Ms. Gabriel to take the majority of the testimony as much as we're able to lead off. With regard to my statement, which I submitted, thank you for your introduction, because you covered the legal framework for special education, which was something that I had wanted to just clarify for those who are not as familiar. And yes, we do recognize and strive to ensure compliance with the federal IDEA law requiring GDOE to provide a free, appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities. And as you know, FAPE really requires us to develop an individualized set of supports and services for every child in need of those services. So to provide FAPE, we participate in what is known as our Iep process, our Individualized Education Program process, which brings together parents, teachers, administrators, and other personnel to formalize the individualized services and supports for each student, as well as the goals to be achieved. So, you set that framework out very well, and that's something we can discuss further as to how we carry that out in operation. But just to give you everybody an idea of the enrollment of our students with disabilities as it relates to the broader population, and then specifically to students with autism, we currently, at least in the past school year, have about 1,854 special education students within GDOE, and that is 6.4% of our total student enrollment last year. This is a kind of on the low end of where we've been over the past 4 to 5 years in terms of numbers of students being served. Within that population, students with autism spectrum disorder total 241, and they make up about 13% of that total population of students covered under special education. In addition, students with autism receive related services, so not just through special education, but also through our related services program, and that includes services like speech language therapy, extended school year, as well as one-to-one aid support. So in 2019 and 2020, they did account for about almost 28% of students who do receive related services. And on top of that, of the 341 students requiring one-to-one aid support, 44% are students with autism, and that accounting for about 151 of the aids provided. So in short, we are familiar with the growing population of students with autism, and we are very cognizant of the services and supports that are available that we are working to provide to ensure that all students have the supports and services that are agreed upon in the Iep process, which is, as you said, kind of the linchpin of our operation. As the legislature well knows, we provide these supports even with the challenges faced by the department in terms of resources and capacity. And so I say this because this is not the first time we've had this conversation. Skilled and licensed professionals are often difficult to recruit and train and retain. Our ability to provide and train and retain one-to-one school aides has also been well documented and presented to the legislature over the past several years. Funding to grow and expand services is difficult to come by, with federal funding being relatively flat over the past 5 years and local budgets pressured by federal tax cuts and revenue shortfalls. But at the same time, we do understand our role and our mission in serving all students, and we do our best to provide the services needed and required by our students with disabilities. So we do look forward to opportunities to have this discussion and to improve and grow our services in line with the developing needs of our kids. I do want to just say, just as a final note, for those who have asked, during COVID-19, there are a lot of states and families and stakeholders who've asked about how the provision of special education services are to be changed or altered as part of COVID-19. At this point, the guidance from USDOE is that there is no change to that guidance in terms of being able to provide services and supports to our students. However, there is recognition of changing circumstances given the fact that there are a lot of school districts have closed across the country. Safety parameters have been the foremost concern for most school districts, keeping students safe. And that also applies to GDOE, which at this point continues to be physically closed and prohibited from opening to students until we get the necessary authority from the governor and public health, which is something we are working on for the start of the school year. So that said, thank you again for the opportunity, and I'd like to see if Ms. Gabriel can also proceed with her presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Superintendent. We will need to share the screen so that we can see the presentation. Is that correct?
Ms. Gabriel, do you need to share your screen, or is that for the next?
Ms. Gabriel, can you please unmute yourself? There we go. One more time. There we go.
I think, sir, the presentation is for the other committee, the informational. What we have is the brief testimony.
Okay, yes, go ahead and proceed with that.
Good morning. My name is Yolanda Gabriel, and currently the Assistant Superintendent for Special Education, the Guam Department of Education. Thank you very much, Honorable Telena Nelson, the Vice Speaker and Chairperson of the Committee on Education. Members of the 35th Legislature have joined us for this morning. Our Guam Education Board Chairwoman, Maria Gutierrez, and the Guam Education Board members, the Superintendent, and our colleagues. Thank you for providing us the opportunity to come up share on what the Guam Department of Education Special Education Division has come up provide to our students with special needs. The Guam Department of Education, which is GDOE, prepares all students for life by ensuring all students receive a high quality education that will prepare them for post-secondary education, the workforce, and civil engagement. GDOE promotes excellence by adopting and implementing high standards and expectations for all students and employees, with everyone performing at their best at all times. GDOE provides support by ensuring that the department's framework identifies and addresses the academic, social, and emotional needs of a diverse student population. The United States Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, known as IDEA, requires each state and entity to provide a free, appropriate public education, known as FAPE, to eligible children with disabilities. FAPE is the entitlement of each eligible children or child with disability to be provided special education and related services designed to meet the child's unique needs in preparation for further education, employment, and independent living. 20 USC Section 1400 D1A, consistent with its mission, GDOE has policies and procedures in place that aligns with the IDEA regulations for ensuring children with disabilities receive special education and related services, components of a high-quality education to prepare them for post-secondary education, the workforce, and civic engagement. GDOE is committed to meeting the educational needs of all students. The brief is intended to highlight GDOE's response to the July 2, 2020 Guam Legislature Education Committee virtual roundtable hearing topical areas with respect to the department's efforts to improve educational programs and services for all students. For each topical area, the department's framework is discussed with relevant supporting guidance for students with disabilities where applicable. The first area, current behavioral intervention and expectation. GDOE has adopted the positive behavior intervention and supports, known as the Pbis framework, as a means to promote positive academic, social, and emotional health of students, consistent with GDOE Board Policy 380. The K-12 Character Education Framework. The premise of the PBI framework is to create a safe, effective, and positive learning environment for every child by explicitly teaching school-wide behavioral expectations. Research has proven that schools are successful when they help students grow academically, socially, and emotionally. The PBIS is an evidence-based three-tiered framework to integrate all of the data systems and practices affecting student outcomes every day. PBIS creates schools where all students succeed. GDOE's PBIS framework therefore serves as a foundation for GDO's behavioral intervention and expectation. The GDOE Division of Special Education continues to support the PBIS framework by providing training to school personnel in the implementation of the Safe Crisis Management, known as the SCM, which is a comprehensive training program focused on preventing and managing crises and improving safety in schools. GDOE has invested in developing local trainers to implement the SCM training program with school personnel, including school aides and teachers who work with children with disabilities. The SCM offers a comprehensive continuum of prevention, de-escalation, and safe emergency intervention strategies for responding to aggressive behavior in schools. In 2017, GDOE Division of Special Education facilitated the program evaluation of the educational services provided for children with emotional disabilities. The program evaluation was conducted by two off-island consultants with expertise in evaluation of professional development projects, children with behavioral challenges, and statewide training in PBIS. The program evaluation reinforced GDOE's Pbis framework and outlined a system approach to improving educational services for children with emotional disabilities. A specific recommendation for improving the referral evaluation and service delivery provisions was to develop an Our Child orientation across all 41 schools with the goal of ensuring all schools have leadership teams for building internal capacity to serve students in their home school. As a result, in 2018, GDOE initiated the development of the Guam multi-tiered system of supports known as the MTSS leadership team, comprised of department and school personnel to further the PBIS supports for students, inclusive of students with emotional disabilities. The second topical area is the independent educational evaluation contract status. Consistent with the IDEA, GDOE has procedures in place to address the provisions for an independent educational evaluation known as the IEE. Currently, GDOE does not have any pending IEE. For the third topical area, this is with the implementation of formal behavioral assessment and behavior intervention. The department's formal behavioral assessment and behavior intervention can be seen through its Pbis framework implementation and the individualized supports provided for children with disabilities with challenging behaviors. A component of GDOE's Pbis framework is to provide school-level training on functional behavior assessment, which is the process of identifying the events which set and maintain a target behavior through a combination of one or more methods. This school level support is complemented by the expertise of the GDOE Division of Special Education in conducting behavioral assessments and designing and supporting the implementation of individual behavior intervention plans if needed for students with disabilities. In August 2016, the USDOE Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, known as OSERS, issued a Dear Colleague letter that provided significant guidance for schools on their responsibility under IDEA to provide children with disabilities appropriate behavioral interventions and supports that are necessary to ensure they have meaningful access to their education. To supplement OSER's 2016 significant guidance, a summary for stakeholders document was developed to outline the main points of the guidance, of which one main point highlighted was that the IDEA requires the Individualized Education Program, known as the IEP, teams consider the use of positive behavioral interventions and supports and other strategies for children with disabilities whose behavior interferes with their learning or the learning of others. 34 CFR 300.324A2I and B2 and 300.320A4 it serves to support that statement. Another main point indicated that the research for the individualized behavioral supports are typically most effective when they are delivered within a school-wide based tiered behavioral framework that provides all children with clear expectations, targeted interventions for small groups who do not respond to the school-wide supports, and individualized supports for those children who need the most intensive behavioral services. And lastly, the fourth topical area, the implementation of training model in the classroom to address the unique needs of students with autism spectrum disorder. GDOE's training model in the classroom to address the unique needs of students with autism spectrum disorder, known as ASD, is based on the premise that the vehicle for providing faith is through an appropriately developed IEP that is based on the individual needs of the child. An IEP must consider the child's present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, and the impact of the child's disability on his or her involvement and progress in the general education curriculum. This requires ensuring that children with disabilities are held to high expectation and are meaningfully engaged in evidence-based instruction that support meeting GDOE's academic content standards. In November 2015, OSERS issued a Dear Colleague letter providing significant guidance to clarify the intent of IDEA. The letter iterated the research that children with disabilities who struggle in reading and mathematics can successfully learn grade level content and make significant academic progress when provided with appropriate instruction, services, and support. The letter further described that the child's IEP must be designed to enable the child to be involved in and make progress in the general education curriculum, which is the same curriculum as for non-disabled children. 34 CFR 300.320A1I, that is the support for the statement. A critical component of providing special education and related services is the development of specially designed instruction, which is adapting as appropriate to the needs of an eligible child, the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction to address the unique needs of the child that result from the child's disability to ensure access of the child to the general curriculum so that the child can meet the educational standards within the jurisdiction of the public agency that apply to all children. And the supporting for that statement is derived from 34 CFR 300.39B3. In December 2017, OSERS issued a question and answer document related to the Andrew F. U.S. Supreme Court case decision. This document is organized into 3 areas: overview, which includes the facts of the case, clarification of IDEA's FAPE requirement, and considerations for implementation. The Andrew F. decision emphasizes that the school must offer an IEP that is reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstances. Making progress is noted as having the chance to meet challenging objectives. The IEP must therefore be designed to provide access to instructional strategies and curricula aligned to both challenging state academic content standards and ambitious goals based on the unique circumstances of the child. The Andrew F. decision is considered essential for informing efforts to improve academic outcomes for children with disabilities. Through OSER's guidance and evidence-based research on effective practices, GDOE's improvement efforts have prioritized the continuation of developing local capacity for designing instructional programs and services to meet the unique needs of students with ASD. There cannot be a one-size-fits-all basis in education. It is about establishing the high expectations for all students and supporting each student meet those high expectations. The GDOE training model in the classroom to address the unique needs of students with ASD, therefore, is the continuity of GDOE's personal capacity for identifying, evaluating, and delivering evidence-based instructional practices for students with ASD. Hyman et al. 2019 provided an executive summary on how timely diagnosis, early intervention, and evidence-based intervention are critical for children with ASD. Further, the summary emphasized how primary care providers should be aware of the recommendation for educational services in the least restrictive environment and the hierarchy of educational interventions based on a student's needs in school rather than a medical diagnosis of ASD. GDOE's investment in developing local capacity is seen through the department improvement efforts. Specific to improving educational programs and services for students with ASD, the GDOE Division of Special Education has developed and implemented a series of training for identifying, evaluating, and providing evidence-based intervention strategies for students with ASD. I have submitted a table that focuses on the training and technical assistance list, the off-island consistent training activities in the area of ASD designed for department personnel and parents of children with ASD. The department efforts continue to prioritize and understanding the ASD research for increasing knowledge and skills of personal educating children with ASD and providing supports for parents of children with ASD. I would like to share also our identification and evaluation. In collaboration with GDOE's local technical assistant provider, University of Guam Cedars, GDOE has partnered with the Children's Hospitals Los Angeles, University of Southern California, known as the CHLA USC, to develop and implement an interdisciplinary comprehensive autism assessment training program to build the capacity of providers in identifying and assessing children with ASD symptoms. The training program includes didactic information, detailed examples, and hands-on activities on the administration, scoring, and interpretation of the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule. Second edition, stands for ADOS-2, and the use of other screening and assessment tools for assessing children with ASD symptoms. The ADOS-2 is an instrument for diagnosing and assessing autism. The protocol consists of a series of structured and semi-structured tasks that involve social interaction between the examiner and the person under assessment. The ADOS-2 training program design includes the CHLA USC trainer conducting on-site and off-site consultation with identified interdisciplinary cohorts comprised of early intervention providers, assessment personnel, speech-language pathologists, emotional disabilities providers, consulting resource teachers, technical assistance providers to the schools, and student support personnel within the GDOE to ensure increased competency of cohort members in administering the ADOS-2, resulting in each cohort member taking the Western Psychological Services, known as a WPS, ADOS-2 examination for certification. To date, 3 cohorts comprised of a total of 25 department personnel have completed all ADOS-2 training requirements and passed their WPS ADOS-2 certification. Beginning July 2020, GDOE Division of Special Education is continuing the technical assistance support to the ADOS-2 cohorts to the implementation of virtual training sessions with the CHLA USC trainer. Evidence-based interventions. In collaboration with the University of Guam Cedars and off-island experts in the area of ASD, GDOE has facilitated on-site and off-site ASD-focused training and technical assistance as listed in the Table 1 that I have provided. Personal capacity development focuses on understanding ASD research and the development and implementation of evidence-based strategies for designing and delivering special education and related services for children with ASD. The on-site training activities have included parent sessions designed to increase knowledge and skills about the ASD research. as well as early identification, evidence-based interventions. In addition, several off-island experts have provided off-site consultation, which is anticipated to continue in 2020 given the COVID-19 pandemic. So the table that I have provided consists of the consultants list, focus topic areas from 2013 to 2020 on the specifically focusing on the autism disability spectrum to kind of help assist us build the capacity of the Guam Department of Education Division of Special Education. Again, I would like to give I'm very grateful that we were able to share this information on the things that we do in helping and support our students with disabilities. Thank you very much and good morning again.
Thank you, Ms. Yolanda Gabriel. Is there anyone else that is going to give testimony on behalf of GDOE? Or was it your presentation?
Just to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Because I see you have your whole team there, so I was just wondering. But thank you everyone for being here. This is very important, and thank you, Mr. Superintendent, for your support on this roundtable. I just have a question for Dr. Ms. Yolanda Gabriel. In the identification and evaluation brief, a piece of the brief, we have the ADOS2 training program includes a CHLA USC trainer conducting on-site and off-site consultation. And that is provided with their visits in your chart that you have given us, you have submitted. But I wanted to know what is the manning for the early intervention providers, assessment personnel, our speech language pathologists, emotional disability providers, consulting resource teachers, the CRTs, and student support personnel. What is the breakdown per item within DOE?
For the breakdown, the student support personnel, we have 2 of those. I'm gonna have also have the assistance of my team for the emotional disorder. Currently, 2 are certified. For the consulting resource teachers, we managed to have a total of 9 to be certified, but 3 of those have moved into a different divisions. For the speech pathologists, we have a total of, I believe it's 3 right now. For the speech pathologists, we had a total of 3. Do we have 4 for speech pathologists? Yeah, total of 4.
A total of 4. Okay.
And the reason we have opted on having the interdisciplinary team is our students with under the spectrum are exhibiting some sort of also supports from this different discipline. So it's a way of also managing the division within the department, the GDOE, on how we're able to build capacity. Because few years back, 20 years ago, there are only like a total of 6 personnel that are working directly in the assessment and evaluation of our students with autism. So we established an interdisciplinary team, and we intend to continue the cohort, considering the turnover of employees or personnel.
Okay. How many students can you just remind us how many students with ASD specific to this program, or perhaps within the whole DOE?
Currently,
okay, go
for
ahead.
the school year 2019-2020, there are 241 students that were identified under the autism disability spectrum.
Okay, and how many of those avail to the need of a speech language pathologist?
For the speech language pathologist, for the speech language pathologist for direct, we have a total of Therese, do you have the current for the speech right now?
Let me get that for you, Mrs. Gabriel, because we can do the breakdown by disability. I think we gave you the total number of children receiving direct speech and consultative services. So let me get the breakdown right now for you, and I can go ahead and send that.
Okay. Because we have the four different mode of services for speech. We have the articulation, the expressive, both consult and direct, and just for consult only.
Okay.
So for 2019, for speech consult only is the lowest number that we have is 8. And for the direct services, which is 10, it's 165 out of the 241. That is for the direct services. And some of the 241 students are receiving consult only for articulation but for the direct, which it's kind of, being provided like a weekly basis, there are a total of 165 out of the 241.
And how often does the student meet with the speech pathologist?
It would be dependent upon on how the school team recommend on the frequency and duration. So it would vary between for 30 minutes weekly or 45 minutes weekly. Some would be having on a monthly basis or a bi-weekly basis. And for those who are in need of some sort of an intervention, it may be quarterly, but those are so minimum. But with our 165, most of them on a weekly basis in varying minutes.
Okay, so it's just 1 45-minute, I guess, a speech instruction.
Direct, one-to-one.
Is there a need for more speech pathologists?
Yes, ma'am. We are instilling speech pathologists, and this is also based on the turnover due to resignations. So currently, right now, we are in need of 4 with our existing staffing pattern, speech language pathologists for the new school year.
Is this because the need of speech pathologists, is this because we don't have that expertise here on Guam, and we would have to promote some kind of off-island hire?
I believe so, but the GDOE is expecting a cohort of speech language pathologists, master's students that are finishing this year over the summer and would be doing their fellowship for 1 year, this coming school year. And also there'll be a second cohort that would be completing on summer of 2021. So with the requirements, licensure requirements, that would also some sort of a challenge, because even though they have finished their academic requirements, there are other certification requirements such as the fellowship and taking the licensure exam. But I remain hopeful and optimistic that within 2020 or 2021, we are going to benefit from this SLP graduates.
And how many are those? How many are those, the SLP grads?
The total cohort, if my memory serves me right, there are a total of 22. Of the 22, 15 are current GDOE personnel that are teachers, and I believe there's one who is a 12-month employee. So
Okay.
we are expecting of those 15 personnel that are able to join us and kind of, work with us to meet the needs of our students.
Okay, that's very good to hear. For the emotional disability providers, you have 2 certified. Is there an,
For the assessment and the evaluation, currently we have 2.
is there a need for additional emotional disability providers?
Right now, we are somewhat stable with the number of positions. However, because of the different need that we have right now, considering the public health emergency, which kinds of affects the social emotional component of a child, that I'm I am anticipating that there will be a greater need for this school year that kind of resulted to the impact of this public health emergency. But previous year, the 6 people that we have with the program lead, we are able to meet the need. But I am somewhat anticipating on an increase of that one.
Yes, because during the year, last year, we had some concerns from parents, and we realized that GDOE was having difficulty retaining ED teachers.
Yes.
And so does that difficulty still exist? Are there qualified people within DOE, or are we anticipating students coming out of the university similar to the speech pathologists?
Well, right now we are currently at this time, we are in need of still of an ED teacher. 2 of them currently. We have 2 vacant positions, and we are just hopeful that we are able to have someone that has the experience to
Mhm.
work with this special population group of students that really require their an expertise on how to work meeting their needs.
Why is it a challenge to retain your ED teachers? What is the challenge? Is it because and to have a constant staffing pattern for ED teachers? Is it because there's not enough teachers that are specialized in this area, or is it just the nature of the job is very difficult, but teachers are available, but many are not willing because it's a very difficult job to have?
It really requires a professional that has the specialization, and at the same time, the ability and the resiliency to work with this special type of students. So that is one, and also considering the fact that when we deal with this type of students, they really to have that specialized skills. With reference to retention, from my understanding, is some of these teachers have kind of, would like to explore other options. I believe one that we have for many number of years just really needed a change and to be part of the regular education component, but they are still with us, So it's just a matter of continuing their level of support, but in a different form and fashion and with a different population group.
Are there any incentives for the ED teachers?
Right now, ma'am, all we have is truly just following the salary wage and scale that we have. We would like to kind of also provide some sort of supports to continuous professional development training, and that is the reason why with the personnel within the emotional disability program, we would like to expand on how we are able to kind of support their emotional needs, but the academic component is truly a challenge right now. And given this current pandemic situation to which, it's anticipating that truly, we just needed that level of support for our kids.
Can you please inform the people of Guam, members of the public, what is the what would an emotional disability teacher experience on a day-to-day basis in the classroom?
Well, the emotional disability teacher that provides support academic somewhat addresses the core instruction of the students in a sheltered environment. Normally, it's also a small population group following the board union requirement of maximum of 12, but that number is not achieved on a permanent or a daily basis. So it will be dependent upon on the recommendation of the team if a more sheltered environment is kind of more conducive to the learning, to the teaching and learning of the student. So we have like although the maximum number is 12, in an average, we have like 8 within the classroom that could range sometimes as low as 3, or in some instances, if they are able to be screened out and able to join their peer group or their school, it's sometimes as low as 1. So, but we normally have an average between 5 to 8 in the ED program in the high school. It's kind of different in the elementary. The elementary, we don't have a big population group within that particular age group. So most of the time for our sheltered classes, it's normally in the middle and the high school. Mr. Babauta, can you add some more on that one with the population?
Yes, and can you just please, perhaps help us to understand the type of behaviors exhibited by the child, so we understand really what is this emotional disability, what the emotional disability teachers face.
Okay, Mr. Babauta.
Hi, I'm Tom Babauta. I oversee the Behavior Supports Unit, which oversees emotional disabilities classrooms. So let me paint the stage. We have a teacher. We have around hovering 8 to 10 kids in the classroom, depending. And then we have typically 5 trained aides. It used to be a 1-to-1, but right now we have kind of like zone coverage. So what we try to do is we try to stabilize. So the kids coming in typically have anxiety, depression, history of abuse, physical, sexual. So if you could think of kids who are typically unstable initially, and then we work towards stabilization. And when I first came on board about 20 years ago to DOE, the focus was on stabilizing behavior, and then we'll get to the academics. But around 10 years ago, we kind of started changing that model, and we started to, work parallel. Let's hit them hard with academics, and then also focus on the behaviors. So, and then prior to implementing the safe crisis management training, we used to have daily episodes of restraints. We call it assist now, where kids are really aggressive. They can be very vulgar. You say good morning and they may cuss back at you. This is a few years ago. Right now, the current situation, you have folks come in, they either withdraw or they might be verbally aggressive. On occasion, they may get physically aggressive. I'm sure you're all tracking the last year when we had a couple of the riots at JFK. Primarily, those were our kids who ended up, we're trying to get them out into the mainstream and get them to reintegrate. Because our idea, right now is they're fully self-contained because they cannot be around their other peers. And once we try to work with them on coping mechanisms, we work with them on academics as well, because many of them are very far behind. So it's for those of you old enough to remember Little House on the Prairie, it's that one little schoolhouse where you have, elementary kids, middle school kids, high school kids. Well, think of it in that sense, but different levels. So you have some of our kids who academically are pre-primer, some of them are, elementary, some middle, some are advanced. We actually have some kids who are quite bright, but just very difficult to control their emotions. So so the day can range from very quiet and calm to very hectic, and one kid could have a meltdown and stop everything for 2 weeks. And so we really work with the families, we work with the providers out in the community, we work with the other service providers. So it's very labor intensive working with this population. So back to the teacher, you asked what's going on with the teachers. It takes a very unique, special person to want to get in there and think of that teacher from Dangerous Minds who can see the positive in every kid, right? And but even there, after a while, it kind of wears on you. Day in and day out, you have new population comes in, a new kid comes in, changes the dynamics. You have somebody who wants to be the alpha, and then so it creates some confusion. So for us in the program, we enjoy it. We like that population. We like to see the change, but it is very taxing on most people. And so most of our teachers 3 to 5 years, and then they're out. And we don't have a specialized training program up at UOG. So in the past, we've done things like just try to mentor, because we have a high teacher and adult to student ratio. We also have a social worker that's assigned. I also go out to mentor the teachers. So we try to provide that support to the teachers, but sometimes it's just overwhelming.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Tom. Mrs. Gabriel, thank you. Please forgive me, colleagues. I'd like to, at this time, acknowledge Speaker Barnes, Senator Perez, and Minority Leader Tello Taitagui, who joined us early on. I hope I'm not missing anyone else. Okay. Really, we'd like to see, I'm hoping that we can have incentives for teachers that, experience this type of dynamic in the classroom. When you talk about violence, it's physical violence. So, there's a risk that they're taking. They can be beaten up by a student. If they try to defend themselves, there's also a possibility of a lawsuit against them. And so I'm hoping that perhaps the board, Madam Chair Gutierrez, if you can perhaps delve into this a little bit more and see if there's incentives that we could give so that these teachers and also additional training for them that will help them to maintain retention within the ED education. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge some of the individuals who are present today that would like to give testimony. So I'd like to afford the public an opportunity to speak, and then colleagues, if you'd like to, I will call on you to if you have any questions after they speak. And so right now we have Dr. Vince Duenas, Camille Paulino, Daniel Summerfleck, and then I also have a testimony submitted by Ms. Tanya Duenas, but I don't see her here at this time. So we'll start with Dr. Duenas. Dr. Duenas, would you like to give testimony?
Yes, I would. Good morning, Vice Speaker, Speaker, and all senators present, members of the general public, and everyone who is present today for this roundtable hearing. I am Dr. Vince Duenas. I represent my son, Hunter, who is 8 years old now, a student of the department and was diagnosed with autism at age 2. I also represent our nonprofit organization, Hunter Speaks organization, which provides behavioral services to children with ASD on Guam. First and foremost, I would just like to thank you all for addressing a very critical area within the Guam Department of Education, an area that has sadly been pushed to the side and hidden away for many years, an area that I know all too well and refuse to ignore any longer, and that is autism spectrum disorders. Students with ASD on island are not provided a free and appropriate public education, and I can say that with almost 100% certainty. Why do I say that? It's because our family has experienced it firsthand. Everything from Guam Early Intervention, Head Start, preschool, general education classroom with associated supports, to include special education, OT, speech, you name it. Not a single person in the department currently is qualified to address the core deficits associated with autism spectrum disorders. That is not to say that we don't have good teachers, because we do. that I believe is more a result of poor leadership, a systematic failure that sends very at-risk children into deeper depths of which some may never return. Individuals with ASD require very structured and methodical teaching strategies that are evidence-based and proven to work. The lack of qualified ASD service providers with nationally recognized credentials makes one question the integrity of education being delivered to our students with ASD on a daily basis. A quality education that is mandated by law as a recipient of federal funds, a civil right. Hallmark of faith is to provide children with special needs equal opportunities that will allow them to make meaningful progress, reach grade level standards, seek higher education, employment, and one day independent living. These goals are very possible if we intervene early on, provide the necessary supports to nurture their growth and development, and with the intensity that they need to become successful. The lack of a structured evidence-based program in Guam public schools is hugely concerning and requires your special attention. I challenge you, senators, to put this under a magnifying glass. Research teacher credentials and certifications. Look into IEPs and the lack of progress our children make. Identify historically how many of our kids with ASD who leave Guam DOE are actually able to go to college, get a job, or live on their own. There are hundreds of kids in desperate need of your help, and I beg you to let's stop setting them up for failure because the cycle needs to be broken. U.S. Department of Education has very strict criteria regarding children with special needs and FAPE. Mandates that I feel our current system is not in compliance with and should be. Several years ago, when we formed the Hunter Speaks Autism organization, together with you senators, we had a vision to one day be able to form a public-private partnership with the Guam Department of Education. Our vision was to one day be able to supply the department with a quality ABA-based program, which is currently the gold standard. I had a great meeting with John Fernandez, Dr. Fernandez, a couple years ago regarding this. And unfortunately, the project was handed over to other people and the discussions fell through. I'm here today not to point fingers, but rather to develop solutions together because this is our island and the bottom line is the children that are in desperate need of our help. And Hunter Speaks organization has grown over the years, and we do have the capacity to help GDOE. In fact, we already have a proposed plan to develop 40 to 60 high qualified teachers within the department. And I hope that we can bring this plan to fruition because we really do need it. And I look forward to participating in further discussion if we are able to down the line. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Duenas. I will now call on Ms. Camille Paulino. Are you still here, Ms. Paulino?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Would you like to give your testimony now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, Speaker, Vice Speaker, Senators of the 35th Guam Legislature, my colleagues, and the general public. My name is Camille Paulino. I worked as an educator, tutor, and therapist for children with autism spectrum disorder on Guam for 11 years now. I began working with this population back in 2009 as a consulting resource teacher, technical assistant with GDOE. That was after receiving my bachelor's in special education in 2008 in Arizona. So my role within the division of SPED was to provide training and support to school teams that were servicing our children on the spectrum. And those children ranged in age from 5 to 22, and they were located throughout the various island public schools. So from 2009 to 2016, that department serviced well over 200 students annually. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on that. The school teams that I consulted with typically consisted of school administrators, general education teachers, special education teachers, paraeducators, and other service providers, including speech therapists, occupational therapists, and our assistive technology specialists. These children were provided the service, of course, if they were deemed eligible under IDEA with an educational diagnosis, and then also demonstrating that the disability itself directly impeded their learning. It was also considered that the service was deemed appropriate if the child demonstrated those qualities that were found in children with ASD. So this support was specifically for those deficits. The majority of the children I serviced displayed deficits in speech, language, motor abilities, adaptive skills, social skills, and developmentally appropriate play. And the majority of those students were placed in a general education classroom with somewhat of a pull-out service to the special education resource room. For those children with severe adaptive impairments, they were placed in basic life skills classrooms if one was available within their school district. In 2017, I left DOE to pursue my master's degree in applied behavior analysis. This is a science that uses research-based interventions to look at how behavior is affected by the environment and how it affects learning. ABA therapy focuses on improving functional skills for real-world application, such as communication, social skills, self-care, and play, while also reducing behaviors that can interfere with learning. It is provided by certified trained personnel who are supervised by a certified behavior analyst. That behavior analyst in turn individualizes treatment programs based on clients' needs and then closely monitors that treatment to ensure lasting and meaningful progress. Since studying and working in ABA, I have witnessed firsthand the significant growth and overall improvement in our clients' quality of life through the use of these evidence-based interventions. The highly structured learning environment created through the use of ABA is designed for children to first learn some prerequisite learning behaviors that are necessary for them to be successful in a general education classroom. Some of these skills include things like just attending to the teacher's voice when there are other distractions in the room, being able to follow multiple step directions, such as take out your textbook, paper and pencil, and open your book to page 5. Paying attention to social cues, such as body language when interacting with a peer, organizing one's personal belongings and supplies, and shifting attention between multiple points, such as referencing the board and then one's paper, then the teacher, and then back to the board. Since research indicates that children with ASD struggle with these type of skills and their respective domains, it can be concluded that these skills must be explicitly taught. It can also be presumed that if children with ASD are not explicitly taught these skills, they are at a great disadvantage to their typically developing peers who typically acquire these skills before being introduced into the school setting. Currently, there are no programs provided by GDOE that provide this structured learning environment that focuses on acquiring these necessary skills to ensure their success in a more demanding setting, such as a general education classroom. The result is evident that our children with ASD are entering the school setting lacking the skills necessary to benefit from a classroom. Once they reach the classroom, it's then found that they are in need of direct support from a paraeducator for the entire school day. And so those paraeducators are then expected to help with closing that gap between the child's current skill level and the content that's being covered by the teacher. The teacher is also expected to provide accommodations and modifications for the child so they can access the content. However, not all of our gen ed teachers are familiar or well-trained in the practice of using those evidence-based interventions to break down the skills that are being taught. In short, we have set our children up to fail without teaching them the skills they need to be successful, and we have set our school personnel up for failure by not providing the necessary training and environmental supports to provide highly individualized instruction. I have to emphasize again that we're talking about a population of well over 200 students annually and their school teams, which are in excess of 600 school personnel every year. This is growing with the increasing amount of children being identified on the spectrum every year. So as was mentioned, all our children have the right to a free and appropriate education, and that includes providing the supports necessary to even access that education. So it's my hope that this roundtable will open up that discussion for how we can better provide those supports.
Thank you very much, Ms. Paulino. And I believe we have Mr. Summerfleck that would like to give testimony. Is he still present? Daniel? Okay, go ahead and proceed, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senators. I realize there's 2 screens, so I'm not going to try and name all of you that are present because I don't want to exclude someone. And I would also thank Tom Babauta. I know he's called up right now, and I want to thank all of our service members for their service. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here to talk about autism. And what I'd like to do is make an attempt to try and provide background material with where Guam has come in autism. 24 years ago, my youngest son, Ezra, was diagnosed with autism. Well, he was evaluated here. We ended up taking him off island to a neuropsych because that was what was recommended to us. He had a neuropsychological evaluation. That evaluation concluded he was autistic. We came back to Guam and we asked for a program for our son. And fortunately, he was enrolled in a Head Start program and a preschool program. As time developed over the next couple of years, my son wasn't the only child with autism. And while my son is considered what's called on the higher end of the spectrum, there were a number of other students that were on the lower end of the spectrum. At that time, when you would go to IEP meetings, there seemed to be a sense that if you asked for anything, that you were evil. I've had questions asked if we dropped our son on his head and if that's why he had autism. They've asked my wife if she was a hard drug user. That was what it was. I don't see that in today's GDOE programs. So we have progressed, but in that progression, part of that progression involved parents like the Dueñases who stand up and say, wait a second, my child needs something more. My child needs to learn. And years ago, there was another family who said, my child needs to learn, and said, if you can't provide it here, until you can, we will split our family, and one member of the family will go off island with the child so that he can get services, and the other will stay here until such time as Guam was able to provide appropriate services. Following that event, Guam implemented an ABA discrete trial program. Guam trained specialized teachers, opened up a preschool program at Tamuning Elementary, and trained one-to-one aides. The training consisted of a week-long program. The trainer was highly qualified. The program was then supervised with an off-island expert while on-island skills were being developed, and they were being developed. And in that process, Guam developed a program for children with autism. I use the word autism. I know everyone else is using ASD. It is a disorder, but nonetheless, the program developed. As years progressed, the program faded. We do not have an ABA program that I'm aware of on Guam, other than through the private sector. Why does this make a difference? Well, I think everyone else has already said that. And the question that I see coming forward is, are we looking at autism like our president is looking at global warming? Are we ignoring the science? Are we ignoring the progressions that have been made? Because the consequence is the same. If we continue to ignore global warming, the scientists are saying our world will suffer substantially. If we continue to not provide an appropriate program, our children will suffer. Which will happen first? The children, because they grow up. And as they grow up, the question becomes, how do they enter our community? How are they able to access our community? How do other people look at them in our community? How are their behaviors affecting their ability to transition into the community. My son was working at a program, and it was a program for other autistic adults. Unfortunately, the coronavirus came up, and that's now been closed, hopefully temporarily. But it is a work group of people that have a lacking of ability to socialize, a lacking of an ability to mingle with the typicals. And that is what this functional skills that everyone is talking about becomes so important. If we don't have the functional skills in place, if we don't follow the science, then what we have is children that we've put through that we haven't maximized the potential. Now, the educators are going to say it's not our role to maximize potential. We're here to provide a free and appropriate education. I don't argue that. But then the question comes when science says what's appropriate, don't we need to follow it? Just like global warming? Don't we need to follow the science? Now, what we call that science, whether we call it medical, whether we call it educational, whether we call it a supportive service, no matter what name we give to it, doesn't change the reality that it's something that the child needs. And if the child needs the service, then it should be made available to them in all settings, whether it be at home, whether it be in the community, and more particularly in their educational environment. Without those foundational pieces in place, I don't think anyone's going to argue if you don't have a foundation, you can't build a house. And it's the same that applies for these young children, these adults, these adolescents. And without providing those building blocks and without looking to go with science, what are the consequences for our community? I can tell you one consequence. Parents are going to continue to have adult children staying at home throughout their entire lifetime. That's a consequence. Children that could be living independent won't be able to. One of the biggest issues that I have with autism is when you ask an autistic individual, why'd you do that? And I ask my son that on a fairly regular basis. And I think a lot of parents with autistic children ask, why'd you do that? I can't tell you, Dad. I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I had an urge to walk out into the street. It just had it. That's the question mark that we need to start looking at. Do we want to continue a course where adults cannot control behavior, cannot answer to their behavior, don't understand their behavior? Or do we want to put in a program, not something that's for every child at the school, Pbis? My wife's a teacher. Pbis is a program that the Department of Education implemented. It's a reward system. Change your behavior. It's not a behavior modification program of the extent and specialization of ABA. That is why the medical community and other professional communities are saying that this is the system to work. There may be modifications of that system. There may be other ways that that system can be implemented. There may be other systems out there completely, but I don't know of them. But the scientific community has recognized and said, this is what we recommend for autistic individuals to obtain success. And if that's the case, then the question becomes, do we provide a system that we know can be successful, or do we continue to argue about it? I would opine to you that the reason that my son is able to go to work while the employment was available, of course, was because of the behavior interventions interventions implemented by the Department of Education, by having that specialized classroom in his early days, by having specially trained individuals who went through a week's worth of training and had to show not just that they've been there for 8 hours, but had to show competency. That was the purpose of it, to show competency. I do know that the Department of Education provides training currently. I believe it is 1 day for school for one-to-one aides, and I believe it is 1 day for teachers. Is that enough to take a teacher who has never taught an autistic child and say, here's the child? I would opine not. And I would also opine that with these children, there needs to be some validation that these teachers, these one-to-one aides, are capable of performing the tasks that are required of them. Now, you might be wondering, well, what happened to all these trained aides? What happened to them is, if you're a special ed one-to-one aide, my understanding, and Ms. Gabriel and others can correct me, you are a yearly contract employee. If you are a school aide that does not have the specialized training, does not have the additional responsibility, you are a classified employee. You are subject to promotion. You are subject to be going from a school aide 1 to a school aide 2 to a school aide 3. You receive increments every year. But most importantly, you know that tomorrow I still have a job. And next week I still have a job. So why would a highly trained one-to-one autism school aide continue to be an autism school aide where the job is much more difficult, the requirements are much higher, if I can never progress? And I'm never guaranteed that next year I'm going to have a job. I can tell you where they are. They're now at the schools, not as specialized one-to-one aides, but as regular school aides. Because they can make more, because they have job security. It's not my job and it's not my role to lobby to you today. My role here today is to try and educate you and to try and pass on perhaps knowledge that has been lost over time. I asked of the Department of Education to see a contract of the person who came to Guam and opened up our ABA, our discrete trial program. No one can even find it anymore. It was some 20 years ago. That was 20 years ago, we had a program. And we had that program because a couple of parents stood up and said, no, I'm not going to accept my child not receiving what is necessary for him to succeed. Because of that, the program changed and developed. We now have another set of parents standing up who have gone even farther. They have opened up a nonprofit program to provide ABA services to the autistic community on Guam. We can't even implement that inside of the school system. Why? I don't know why. I don't know why. But I would say if we're looking at our needs of the autism community, we need to look at what nationally is going on. We need to look at what science is saying. And I believe if that's done, there's only one answer. Just like when it comes to the issue of our seriously emotionally disturbed children, there was only one answer: develop a wraparound system, open, appropriate, community-based programs here on Guam. Stop sending kids off island and start keeping them in our community. We need to do the same here. We need to give these children an opportunity to be with their peers at their school and receive an appropriate education. Now, there's been discussion about the Supreme Court case. There is no definition of what's appropriate. That's why people like myself and Mr. Nassas argue back and forth on a regular basis as to what is appropriate. That's why people like Ms. Gabriel, Superintendent Fernandez, look at it and try and figure out what is appropriate. When we develop IEPs, oftentimes a question is asked, well, the parents were part of the IEP. If they wanted to object, why didn't they? I'm a lawyer. I sat down on my son's IEPs. I trusted those people at the table that they were doing what was best for my child. They are the professional educators. Let's stop pointing blame and let's start looking at developing a system that services our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Summerfleck. And I agree with you about the issue on one-to-one aids. Many of these one-to-one aids are funded through federal grants, but I have spoken with the chairwoman of the Board of Education, and I have asked her to see what we can do to find an avenue to classify these one-to-one aids, because we're on the same page here. They need some continuity. The child needs some continuity, especially with the one-to-one aid who's always there with them every day. And then their contract ends, and then they'll receive a completely different one-to-one aid. And it's difficult for the one-to-one aid, and it's also difficult for the child for that ability. At this time, I would like to read testimony from Tanya Duenas. I do not see her present today, and I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Senator Therese Terlahi. Thank you, Senator Terlahi, for being present. Testimony for DOE Roundtable dated Thursday, June 2nd, 2020. This is Tanya Duenas' testimony. Half-a-day senators. The CDC estimates that 1 in 54 children have autism effects, all ethnic and social and economic groups. The United States federal law requires that public schools educate all children, regardless of their disabilities. But the law does not spell out what schools must provide, which has made it possible for schools to provide little more than de minimis opportunities for children with special needs. And sadly, this is happening in Guam. Because of that, our island is failing many school-age children with autism. Many students aren't able to communicate what is happening at school. They spend their entire school day with their one-to-one aide and or teacher who have little to no training in autism, with little oversight to ensure a child is receiving FAPE. We need to give all students the best therapies available in the school setting, putting in the necessary funds to do so. The investment in our children will pay off later. If we don't act now, the economic cost of caring for individuals with autism would rise to $461 billion in 2025, in the absence of more effective interventions and supports across the lifespan. This is from Autism Speaks 2020. Research shows that if we give the best available special education to children with special needs, those children are more likely to grow up to become productive, independent, contributing members to society. Every report prepared by the National Council of Disability has shown widespread noncompliance in relation to IDEA. And it's not just noncompliance on paper. We can see the results in very high unemployment rate of children who graduate from SPED programs. They do not have the requisites to work. They do not have the means to get into a post-secondary program, and they are falling farther behind. Reference is Claypool and McLaughlin, 2017. In the Andrew F. versus Douglas County School District, the court concluded that a social district must provide every child, regardless of their disability, an opportunity to make meaningful progress. The court ruled that Colorado's SPED program provided minimal opportunity for Andrew, which was inadequate for a child with autism. The new ruling was instrumental in affirming that children with autism need and rightfully deserve more. I challenge all of you to make effective change and to stop the cycle of inequality. All the best, Tanya Duenas, RN, MSN/MHA, mom of a child with autism. At this time, I would like to just speak to thank those that have given testimony, to sharing your concerns with the legislature and also with Guam Department of Education. I'd like to thank Guam Department of Education for the notable work that they have done to servicing our children. And I am listening to these testimonies and reading these testimonies for the first time. And I want to say that this does not discredit the work of the teachers or the support staff, the deputy superintendent, the assistant superintendent in the SPED department. We know that you do exceptional work for the children. We know you make huge sacrifices for them. So please do not feel like this is an outright attempt to discredit the hard work that you have done throughout the years. I think that these testimonies perhaps are a way to give us a better understanding about what these parents are facing and how to address the appropriate education standards for each child that is that have special needs. So I'd like to again to thank GDOE and their team for the awesome work that they are doing and for being here today to address these issues so we can all understand as a community on how we can improve and move forward together to help our community and help our parents and our children, specifically with these special needs. And so at this time, I'd like to start with offering my colleagues a opportunity to question members that are here present today and also members that gave testimony. And I will start with you, Speaker Barnes, if you are still.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Manana Sizuis, thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to hear the presentation. And I'm so appreciative to the team at DOE and the experts and also the Education Board for being on and my colleagues. I truly believe in my heart as it relates to persons with disability, more so ASD, and the need for us to look for more support. I'm very appreciative of the testimonies that have been presented by the community, and I believe that continuity is the key to everything. I think the support for the training that I think is very important. I understand that even with the great work the Department of Education is doing, I think more can be applied to. And there was something of interest that Dr. Vince Duenas brought up, and the idea of support and literally further facilitating the need to help out those with ASD, right? And that would be public-private partnerships and literally looking at grants to support that also. I know that we are in budget sessions right now, and if the opportunity is there to look at, maybe the question would be for Mr. Fernandez. I don't see him on my frame, but if he's still here, what can we do to look at the public-private partnership component? And have we looked at further identification of federal funds that are out there, especially now when the CDA and other grants and resources from COVID that could literally help our students get by and maybe retool or retrain or regroup to making sure that as we move forward now during this time of COVID, how are we going to assist? Because I know that as much as the teachers do, there's really needed support from one-to-one. I did speak to the vice speaker about the one-to-one aides and how they're not classified, and the frustrations that they have to go through every 9 months after everything's over, reapply, get re-evaluated, get re-interviewed, and then they switch. And after a student finally gets comfortable with that aid that literally supports their efforts, there's a big change, and we know that doesn't work well with the students. So I'm hoping that I can hear some light, and if not, I'd like to see how we can help support those efforts. And I was really grateful that the vice speaker did bring up that part also, and Mr. Summerflick, because I know that continuity is everything as we look forward in helping these students. So, Mr. Fernandez.
If I may, Vice Speaker, and thank you, Speaker. I do want to just, thank everybody who's here, and also recognize that, yes, in fact, Dr. Duenas and I did have an opportunity to meet a couple of years ago to talk about the new organization and to talk about autism in generally and the needs of our kids. And so I appreciate his advocacy on behalf of not only his child, but on behalf of others in similar situations. I think where we're heading, though, is really trying to unpack a lot of the different issues that do need to be unpacked if we're going to try to find a way forward. And part of that is, again, we've talked about developments on the legal side relative to Faith, relative to Andrew, and that's a continuing discussion, and hopefully that will benefit us as we look at how to move forward. And then the issue of the legislature and our constant conversation about resources and some of the challenges that we recognize going from not only our licensed professionals, but all the way to all the one-to-one school aides that we invest in and train, but haven't been able to figure out how to be able to afford and sustain them in their work. And we mentioned that, and we mentioned the conundrum about having these trained individuals serving our most vulnerable students, but their reward is to move on and move forward into to situations where we now have to train others again to deal with our most vulnerable students. So I appreciate all of that. I think what is good to hear out of this is I know Dr. Duenas mentioned that he has a plan for how to build capacity and expand the services available. And I'd be very interested in hearing more about that, especially at this juncture. I think with our SPED department, we look at services, we look at utilizing the IEP teams, and we look at what capacity is available to provide services. But as part of this effort, we're going to need to educate everybody about what's available, what's out there, what services are things that should be considered. And if there is a plan to build capacity, Speaker, you mentioned public-private partnership. I'm open to hearing that. So, while this discussion has been going on, I know that our chairwoman, who also chairs our committee on looking at personnel matters, is interested in setting up a work session, and maybe that might be an opportunity to have that plan available and presented, so we can look at that and evaluate how that might work in public-private partnership. So I don't know, Madam Chair has her hand up to add if she'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Buenas, Speaker, buenas, Vice Speaker, and all of the senators. My name is Maria Gutierrez. I'm the chairwoman of the Guam Education Board. And yes, this issue has been a big concern of me because I do have a grandson. And I'll just be honest, I don't think I'm satisfied with the services so far. But the school aides, in the last Zoom meeting or work session we had, is one-to-one school aides, and this has been a problem. And I feel for those employees because they don't know if they're going to be retained or not. I asked, how are these one-to-one aides hired? Because they need to be in the system, in this BOE, like 30 days or even 2 months for continuous training because the type of students they're handling is very different, and they need to know and be prepared if this is what the students that they want. And when they said there's an evaluation that happens at the school, and then the principal will recommend. So I reach out to some principals and I ask, how is are your 1-to-1 still coming back or what? Said we submit the list to the special education office, and then they will be the one to contact them. That bothers me because once a principal recommends that's 1-to-1 will return back to the same school because they're handling the same students, even moving up grade to grade. That should be already, the principal should be the one to make the selection, not wait for special education office to be the one to say, okay, you can bring this back. Because I had one person that called me, and right there during that Zoom meeting, the associate superintendent of special ed said, I have the list. Have her call me. I called that school 1-to-1, call this number only to be referred to another person. And the response is, call the principal at your school. There's too many, and that bothers me, okay? Because there's too many red tapes. We shouldn't have that red tape. Yeah. The principal already say, I recommend, that's it. Not for the special ed office to be the one to say, okay, or tell personnel. Because yes, they're under federal funding. But senators, this has been an issue. And I talked to the vice speaker yesterday, that I am moving this forward because we need to let these people know. This 1-to-1 aid that has been with the students from elementary, then going up to middle, then going up to high school, shouldn't be changed because like you said, Speaker, they're already used to each other. They're buddy. And that's the problem. And I share the concern of all those that are testifying today. I know Mr. Summerflex, he has been a strong advocate for the students with special needs. And I thank him for that. But we need to improve the services for our special ed students, our students with disabilities. I was on a Zoom meeting with the National State Board of Education. And one of the things is the students, we even hearing a Secretary of Education, Betty DeVos, students with special needs are to be treated the same as everybody else. There's no waiver. So I assure you, Speaker and Vice Speaker, I am calling a work session next Friday, February 10, Zoom. Please participate because I am going to be bringing this up, the hiring of the position under the special ed. Because yes, there is a law also. You asked us, I speak about how do we offer incentives to these applicants or the employees are there. There's a law, recruitment above step. Teacher 1 to 2, teacher 2 to level 5 for special education teachers, math, science, language arts. And this is recruitment above step is recruitment difficulties. And we have recruitment difficulties for special ed teachers. And the other positions I said, exceptional qualifications. We need to work on that so that we can attract them. Because nobody, they go to college, they got their degree and everything, and then we're just going to offer them step 1. That's not fair. That's why the recruitment above step law was implemented, was created, and it's a public law. So I assure you, Speaker and Vice Speaker and Senators, we will work with you, but please also consider giving us the budget to make these employees, the 1-to-1 aid, be classified position. They've been trained for, this schooler that I know was trained for 5 years. So now she's still texting me, do you think they will pick me up? And she has 6 kids. She's a single parent. So she wants to know whether she's gonna have a job or no. So I think the authority of bringing them back is at the principal's level, not down at waiting at spec office for them to be called. Up to now, he hasn't been called whether she's going to come back or not. This is, I'm sorry, but we need to work. There's a lot of improvement. There's a lot of improvement that we need because our students with special needs are very precious. I always hold that in my heart. Now that I know that I have a grant, the more, because it is, we have to provide the services. Thank you, Senators.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Madam Vice Speaker, Madam Chair on this Oversight Committee. I think it's really important that as we look at that continuity, please, I won't take on the teachers and what they do. That one-to-one employee that works closely with these students are very critical and very grave. I know because I have a loved one who literally worked for the Department of Education for 11 years, and because of the frustration, it wasn't easy to try and work with that concept of bringing the student from whether it be elementary all the way up to high school, which is that service that's needed and that comfort for the person with the disability. But I want to make sure that when we address this, that especially with the one-to-one aids, that it's not just for ASD, but for all the different disabilities that are out there that DOE needs to work with when it does its IDEA. One of the questions that come to mind to me, Madam Chair, is I need to ask about the impact, the financial impact right now based on the federal grant that's provided for that one-to-one, and then what would the impact be if we looked into a classified position? I'm sorry if I was only told to ask one question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can we just hold that question so our colleagues have an opportunity
I understand.
to ask one question and move forward? And also the opportunity of the board to produce a resolution so that we can help push policy to move these things forward to assist GDOE. But before I go on to our next colleague, I'd like to give Mr. Mark Mendiola an opportunity to speak. Mark?
Hey, thank you, Vice Speaker. Thank you very much, Senators. This is an important discussion that we're having here. I want to thank you, Vice Speaker, for putting that on. I know that there's a lot of gaps in some of the areas, but there are a lot of people behind the scenes that are really working tirelessly to ensure that our kids get the services. I'm a parent of a child, and I have some really good success stories. My son no longer needs a one-to-one aid. We work towards independence. Dr. Like Attorney Summerfleck mentioned that, we want to teach our kids so that, they can be productive citizens once they leave the Department of Education. And so I really work well with my team. And unfortunately, there's some folks out there that do not know how to navigate through the system. And I think that goes both ways, but I know that the department is working and doing its best to provide that type of services. Dr. Vince, I appreciate your presentation, and I definitely would like to learn more about it. And I believe we're going to have a work session. I'm open to having that dialogue and that discussion and putting that forth with the superintendent, of course, and the team looking at it. I think that's where we can really put some teeth to this so that we can get the services that is sorely needed. And I'm glad that the nonprofit organization exists, because I think that truly is a gap or an area in which the Department of Education needs that additional support, especially when it comes to expertise. Here working at the University of Guam, I do know that there are careers, and there are, we try to guide them as best we can into these types of careers, right? Hard to fill positions. And the chairwoman is absolutely right that it's very tough to keep these folks too when we cannot provide that job security, and especially if they're going to be specialized in these fields. And I would like to explore what Attorney Dan Summerfleck was saying, that we should flip that model around with the highly specialized school aides and making sure that they're in the classified position. And of course, it always comes down to the budget, but we really need to, and I believe the superintendent, we've always made it a priority. And I think when it comes down to it, it's, comes down to the resources and the finances of government. But as the chair of the Budget and Finance, I will work with the chairperson of the Human Resources And we will come up with that resolution, Madam Vice Speaker. I think it's if anything that's going to come out of this roundtable discussion is going to be those kind of directives or clear path for us so that we can give you folks guidance to assist us in providing these types of services. And I'm just glad that I'm a part of this so I can hear it and see it, and the folks that are working in the trenches, especially in the nonprofit, and also our folks working in the Department of Education. I think that the area where we just need to communicate and align the stars, so to speak, so that we can kind of get the end result, which is what, as a parent, is to get our kids to be productive citizens and to really just manage that. So I look forward to that, Madam Chair. Once we get that work session, we can coordinate that with the folks from Hunter Speak and anybody else that would like to come in and participate. But Madam Vice Speaker, thank you very much for holding this roundtable. It's very positive, and I appreciate you recognizing the people working in the Department of Education, because you used to be a teacher, and I'm pretty sure you're well aware of the struggles and the challenges that we all face. And we're in this pandemic, and there's a lot of questions that a lot of our parents are asking us, especially my wife and I had a healthy discussion this morning about what we're going to do with our son. And I asked him, I said, son, do you want to go to school or do you want to go online? He goes, no, I want to go to school. So that's good. When our children want to say that they want to go to school, that's a good thing. So thank you for everybody's work. And I appreciate the opportunity to listen further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to call on now Senator Mary Torres, if you have any questions or like to speak on the issue.
Yes, thank you, Vice Speaker. I want to, first of all, acknowledge the great contributions that everybody has made in special education for our students. Dr. Duenas and Attorney Summerfleck, your presentations were absolutely arresting. Many of the concerns I had, you brought up, and I think what we're dealing with here is a situation with ASD where 1 in 54 children, I believe, are affected. And so it's a very relative topic that we have to discuss. And, as senators, I think, we need to continue this discussion. And I'm just totally overwhelmed by all the complexities that we have to address with regard to special ed for our students. Because as Attorney Summerfleck, you indicated, in fact, we have to prepare our children for the future. And I believe, John Fernandez, you mentioned it as well. The end goal is how do we prepare them for the future? Similarly, 1 in 54, there are several children in our family with autism, 2 of whom have graduated from high school. And yes, they're highly functional, but we also recognize that their lifeline is their parents. And without their parents, they will not function independently. So how do we shore them up so that they can reach that goal? But the only question I had, million running through my mind, but back to Mr. Babalta, the other great concern I have is the emotional health of our students. And those kids that are emotionally challenged, Mr. Babalta, does DOE also work with Child Protective Services so that they can identify those at-risk kids and work in conjunction with the Department of Education and other providers? You mentioned providers, and I'm just curious the range of those providers. If you can elaborate, please.
Sure. We work with all the child serving agencies right now.
Okay. Including Child Protective Services, so you're aware of the kids that are maybe in the part of the justice system and the reform efforts and the like?
Correct. So we work within the framework of the Pbis and multi-tier systems of support. So what that is we have three levels actually. So on the special education side, the population that we work with is on the top of the tier. So those are the cases that require the most amount of support. So all the different child serving agencies provide input. We work with families. So we work with, on the higher intervention level. So we also have our student support services that works with the at-risk population, and they work with also the school guidance counselors. So we try to do it as a team. Obviously, with Child Protective Services having 2,600 cases a year, it's hard for them to manage. But when we all try to work in unison toward the same goal. On our side with the kids with an identified serious emotional disturbance, Dan had mentioned about 20 years ago, the system kind of moved more towards this wraparound support. We moved towards looking at the individual and the family in the center and looking at all of the different supports. Obviously, the education department, the kids spend 8 to 9 hours a day with us. So we're a big chunk of that kid's, world, and it's a captive audience. So we do try to provide more supports on our side. And I know that the school district has been having more efforts towards meeting the mental health needs at the school site. The last couple of years, we've been really pushing for a lot of the social emotional focus, and training teachers, training aides, training the entire school district. So we do. Now, there are going to be cases where we're not always tracking, and sometimes kids do fall through the gaps, and we are working to address that. But anytime something is made known to us, we do try to jump on that, whether it's on the special education side or the 504, a kid with a disability who might require some assistance, not necessarily in terms of special education, but whatever kind of supports that they would need in the school district. And even if they don't qualify for that, down at the school level, the teachers are really good about making referrals to the school guidance counselors and so forth. So we do try, but we do have some shortfalls.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for that, because we know that with children with emotional challenges, they have an impact on everyone around them, and also an impact on the quality of the school experience for everyone in the system. So I'm glad to hear of your efforts. Thank you. And I don't have any. In the interest of time, I'll end right here, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Senator Pbis.
Good day, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair, for bringing this very important topic to the forefront. And I just want to acknowledge everybody here who's contributing to the education of our youth. And as a former teacher, I appreciate I do understand the challenges as a general education teacher. And I also appreciate the perspectives of Dr. Duenas and Camille Paulino. So just one thing I'd like to get some clarification on is the PBIS, the Positive Behavioral Intervention and Supports, and versus I believe it's the Applied Behavioral Analysis. So Deputy Administrator Yolanda Gabriel, you'd mentioned that there was guidance from DOE, US DOE, regarding that PBIS is it true that it's the recommended method? Did I hear that correctly? If you can clarify that. Sorry, you're still muted.
Yes, Senator Pbis.
So DOE, that was the guidance that US DOE gave. In regards to applied behavioral analysis, is there room for utilizing that particular method, or at least to use that method, or what is the position of US DOE and Guam DOE?
The position of US DOE regarding certain programs are more focused generally on evidence-based practices. So there are a lot of programs like ABA that kind of, reflect some of the practices that we have. So for the guidance of OSEP, their guidance is we address and plan for the child's individualized education program based on their unique needs. And from that, there we access some of the existing evidence-based practices. And for the most part, there are some like an intermingling of different specialized programs that we kind of tap on so that we are able to address the unique needs of the child.
Okay, so Camille, is this something that you think that there could be some improvements, or as far as utilizing ABA more or integrating that processes, do you feel like there's it could be tweaked a little bit more to provide more support?
Yes, ma'am. Currently, there is a national board that certifies providers, so registered behavior technicians as well as behavior analysts. And that training is overseen by that national board. So if we can work together to get more of our public school staff trained and certified, then, then we're building our workforce to support those kids in what is considered the gold standard of ABA for autism services.
Okay. And so, Ms. Yolanda, is this something that is workable, or you feel like there could be an increase in ABA to kind of provide more support for students with special needs?
As I have shared earlier, we don't confine on certain programs, but we make it a point that whatever is identified in the student's individualized education plan, we kind of respect it. So it's always a team decision. If a school team would make a decision that ABA would be of great assistance or support to the child, then we would follow, the IEP of the child. And if the resource is not existing, then the department or the GDOE will find means so that we are able to extend the level of support. So again, there are a lot of programs, evidence-based practices that can be accessed and utilized in order to address the unique needs of the child. As like what it was mentioned, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So for some, that would be, there are some evidence-based practices that's highly workable to a certain child. And if doesn't work, we kind of, consider other evidence-based practice or strategy or whatever, identify with the child. We are also considering on what would be the present level of academic achievement, functional performance of the child. So whatever would be the baseline, we have to start off so that we are able to work on improving or make progress for a child. So the position that I have is it depends upon the school team. What are the parameters that would kind of be beneficial for the child in order to achieve his education plan?
Thank you. Thank you for that excellent clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll reserve my next question for the next round.
Thank you, Senator Perez. Senator Therese Terlahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to everyone who made their presentations today, and of course for the work that you are all doing for students and children. I'll get straight to the point. I just want to clarify, Dr. Duenas, is this ABA program, I know you and Attorney Summerfleck, you talk about this as being the gold standard of, in dealing with autistic children. Is this something that is adequate to be just dealt with as part of an IEP, or are you advocating that the Pbis be shifted and replaced with an ABA kind of curriculum? It sounds to me like I don't know, just comparing it to other parts of DOE, it sounds like a curriculum decision, overall, or is it a special program, as Ms. Gabriel's saying, that's what they're doing right now?
Yeah. Pbis was a system developed in the 1980s to address misbehavior in kids in the general population. So it was never adapted to children with autism. In certain school districts, they do utilize Pbis for individuals on the spectrum. However, we got to be able to distinguish misbehavior from maladaptive behavior associated with autism. So kids on the spectrum are not misbehaving or acting out all of the time. So even if we utilize Pbis, I think most kids on the spectrum, as Tom mentioned, would fall under tier 3 of that model, which requires intensive behavioral support. And Pbis does use principles of ABA therapy, pivotal response therapy, antecedent interventions, naturalistic teaching, and then modeling and joint attention interventions and strategies. But it is also data driven. And if we're not taking data to drive programs and we don't have the intensity of the program to provide to the child, then it's just, I mean, we're just saying we're providing something without effectiveness of that service. I do think that ABA is the gold standard, and many school districts throughout the country continue to adopt programs utilizing ABA. In fact, many school districts employ board certified behavior analysts as the head of special education departments and ABA programs within the school system. So I did mention developing a program. It's not a program that we created. It's a program that already exists in other school districts throughout the U.S.
But it sounds like it's can it be used in conjunction with PBIS? And for example, is this two programs running simultaneously, or we're trying to replace one? I
don't think we are trying to replace PBIS, because PBIS applies to the general population as well. I think ABA program, and we're talking specifically about autism, but creating an ABA specific program for children with ASD is definitely needed in the department. And you know, our lead analyst on our team, and we were lucky to recruit Dr. Annette Groen, who has 20 years of experience in the field, trained out of UCLA, worked with Dr. Ivar Lavas, who is known as the pioneer of ABA. She is now on the Hunter Speaks team and a renowned behavior analyst. We're working with her to develop a school-based model, a very cost-effective model that will produce very high quality and sustainable results. Another specialty area that she practices in is distance learning and telehealth. And considering our current situation with COVID, I think she's gonna be a huge asset to the island. I think she's gonna be a huge asset to the department. And I do look forward to working with the board and everybody at DOE to develop this program. And the reason why I say it's cost effective is because you already have the team in place at GDOE. We have the teachers, you just need training. And it's gonna be a 3-year model that's gonna produce a lot of high quality practitioners or educators. And I look forward to it. I always had a vision, and this happens already throughout the country. Philadelphia, if you want to do some research, has a very similar program, and they implement a curriculum called the STAR curriculum in conjunction with the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, as well as the I believe it's the Children's Hospital Philadelphia, but they have a very good program that is collaborative with the medical and the educational side.
Thank you, Dr. Duenas. So, Ms. Gabriel, is that something that is possible, as far as you know, with your, with the federal requirements, that you can fit an ABA program for children who are already diagnosed with autism? That would be kind of applied to them, and I guess instead of the PBIS, or I don't know. Can you do both as they're describing it? That type of a intensified program.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi. Just to note, historically, actually PBIS is one of the funded programs of the Office of Special Education Programs that kind of, was extended to the U.S. Department of Education and was kind of, implemented nationally. Okay, so it started with the Office of Special Education Program, and while acknowledged by the U.S. Department of Education to be widely used. With reference to the ABA program, as what I have made mention, I'm not discounting the validity or the effectivity of the program. what we have and the guidance that we have with the Office of Special Education Programs is that we have to be kind of, identifying what would be the unique needs of the child in order to identify the level of support. There are some students that can kind of, respond positively to certain strategies and techniques. So here at the Division of Special Education, we thrive on really looking the child's unique needs. And that's where we're coming from. We don't want to be confined on a certain program or methodology in working with our students. All students, regardless they are within the general education or students with special needs, have a certain type of a unique need that they needed to meet in order for them to access their learning. So just for the record, I'm not discounting the effectivity of ABA program. The work that we do is kind of child-focused, student-centered, and also kind of determining the extent or the baseline where we are going to start in working with the child and identifying certain methodologies, evidence-based practices that will enable the child to achieve their education success. So that's where my stand. Eventually, it's not my personal decision. It's always a school decision that consists of the child's teacher, their providers, and their parents. So it's a decision that they have to make for the child's need.
But it could also be a program that's implemented on a DOE school-wide, system-wide level, because that's the only way we're going to bring in the resources that we need for it. For example, well, it sounds like a more efficient way to bring in the resources that we need for. I know that we're short on time, so let me just ask: would all students with autism, Dr. Duenas, benefit from an ABA program, or do we need to give them access to other programs as we're describing here?
I can comfortably say that all students would benefit from ABA to a certain extent. Like Ms. Gabriel mentioned, I want it to be available as a related service within the IEP. What the issue is historically, it's been impossible to get ABA into the IEP. And that's why we're kind of having this discussion right now. It's been impossible for our team to get into the school system, even for my son, which is crazy because we're there to support. So I do think a school-wide program should be implemented, and at the very least, start recognizing ABA as a related services and support for children with ASD within the IEP. And I think that's going to take education. ABA is relatively new to the island, so I think people need to bring the research forward and know that it is, again, the most effective method, and that is why it is the only method adopted on the medical side.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, I would like to call on Minority Leader, Senator Taitigui. Is she still present?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for holding this hearing, especially on this topic matter. It hits home for me. My nephew is autistic, and he's young in age right now, so it's important to hear what the plans are for the future for our children. First, thank you, Dr. Fernandez, or John Fernandez, for being here and providing your team to do presentation, as well as those who testified, Dr. Vincent Duenas, as well as Dr. Attorney Summerflick. I received a text, and Yolanda, it's good to see you again, Yolanda. I've known you for many years, and an excellent presentation that you brought forward to us. I'm looking forward to having a copy of that, if you can please provide us, because that will help us later on in the future to go back and research on as we follow through with this program moving forward. So I appreciate that. If you can give it to the unless the Vice Speaker already has it, and then it could be submitted to us. While we're on this virtual hearing, there are people who are watching out there and listening to everything that you're saying here. And in fact, I have a constituent that called my office to let me know that she's watching. And she wanted me to ask a question for this panel. And the question was, for DOE, what services are available for severely disabled students other than offering basic life skills? Could somebody, Yolanda maybe, if you can answer that? You want me to repeat the question again? Okay. So she asked, the constituent who's watching right now currently, texted and asked, what is DOE, what services are available for severely disabled students other than offering basic life skills?
So with reference to students with significant cognitive disabilities, this will range from whatever the school team has identified. So depending on the need, if they need speech services, so this is what we call the related services that we have. But let me just go back step. So the services that are provided in the education realm is supposed to be services that would be needed in order for them to access their education, okay? So for example, the mobility issue, which is kind of supported by a physical therapist, work with a child or a student who has some sort of a disability in order to access the classroom or other parts of the school building. So this would be dependent upon that they may be some sort of medical in nature, but the identified support is for them to access their education. Same with the occupational therapists. Occupational therapists would be working the small motor skills. So since in education, there's a lot of writing, the use of fine motor skills. So an occupational therapist would be working with a student on how they are able to use their small motor skills in order for them to continue with their learning in the classroom or in the school building. So we may have some related services like speech would be addressing the language needs or the articulation needs of our students. And again, it would be bridging some sort of a path on how they are able to kind of use certain, needs in order for them to kind of access again their education. So there will be other services that we have aside from those, depending on the disability strand. For our vision students would be one big thing is the orientation and mobility, as well as accessing their core with the use of the specialized equipment using Braille. So these are all incorporated on the child's plan on how they are able to, again, access their grade level content, but there's some sort of a need to kind of provide that level of support. The one-to-one aid situation that was kind of, brought about earlier, I just want to bring it up to the attention of the panel that since I came on board as the program lead for the special education for Guam Department of Education, I continued to lobby and ask for support so that we are able to permanentize the people that work as providing direct services to our students. In fairness, though, to the GDOE management and the board, they continually to support whenever I ask for that additional position in order to carry out the mission of the department. But the reality is this, my dear senators, and maybe this is a time that I could have and personally lobby that these special individuals that help one-to-one support be provided the opportunity to be permanentized. Just to let you know, I came to the Division of Special Education in 2011. So when I prepared the budget 2012, initially I have asked for 40 one-to-one aids personnel to be permanentized in order to establish continuity and support to our students with special needs. And during that time, in 2012, there were a total of 269 one-to-one aid supports to our students. So I was asking 40. Budget 2013, it was still 40. And sometime around in budget 16, the number went up to 80. Why? Because the numbers have increased. And just to let you know too, that prior me preparing the local budget, I make it a point that we work on first the federal budget monies that we have. Historically, I have here for the record, and I am willing to show with you that for the federal budget, for the local budget since 2011, just to let you know, it's only supporting 68 personnel locally funded since 2011 that I joined in. It has been consistently that the Division of Special Education budget ranged for over a little 4 million, supporting 68 personnel. And please, I just would like to let you know that the GDOE management and the Board of Education has been consistently supportive whenever we ask for that increase of personnel. But when the time of the allocation comes about, we are stuck on that particular number of personnel. Now with the federal budget, for the record, and I can show you the figures, over 90% of the federal budget goes to the salaries and benefits of people supporting Division of Special Education, and it ranged to a little over 500 personnel. So we have less than sometimes 10% just to kind of support our operational needs that would consist of, professional development supports, equipment needs, additional support to our personnel. So we really need to kind of, I'm right now, I had this opportunity to be directly asking since budget 2012, I've been asking support to permanize our one-to-one aids. Currently, right now, the way it goes, with the 90% salary and benefits that is for division personnel, I would like to offer you the data that close to 60% of the federal budget goes to the salaries and benefits of one-to-one aids. So you could see here that the level of support that we have for our children is there, notwithstanding that the present leadership of the Division of Special Education has to give in order for us to hire additional support. With regards to retention, the board chair is correct that the principals provide the evaluation and performance of school principals, and we do this as early as February. The goal of the Division of Education is just to provide the connection to the Office of the Human Resource of the GDOE. We don't make selection and recommendation of the schools. It's the principals. So in February, the personnel comes in, talks to the principal provides the evaluation and recommendation, principal signs for the recommendation for the aid to return the following year. The Division of Special Education don't have a hand on the processing, on the direct processing of returning employees, but they are told as early as February that they are recommended coming back. So again, it is with my deep gratitude that I'm afforded this opportunity to kind of in a brief way, just to let you know on the status on how we are able to manage both local and federal budget. Thank you very much.
Well, Yolanda, I'm glad I gave you that opportunity to lobby for the department, and the numbers are reflecting the lack of funding in your area and permanizing from 269 to only having 40. And now, well, actually now it's up to 80. So that's something that's good to know, that moving forward on the budget bill, I think the vice chair or the vice speaker heard that concern, and we can address that in the budget bill moving forward. So I just wanted to ask Tom about on your perspective on the question that I asked earlier to Yolanda about the other than what severely disabled students, other than offering basic skills. Can you also comment on that too as well, Tom? what is DOE, providing for as far as services available for severely disabled students? I'd like to pose that question to you as well, Tom. And what you might, if Yolanda already answered it, then that's fine. But I'd like to hear from you as well.
Sure. I'm going to stay in my lane. So I oversee the behavior side. So, although I have personal experience with my own children, I'm going to go ahead and say that Yolanda went ahead and answered that appropriately. So what we look at is individualizing, based on the team at the school. They would look at what, supports that we would have. So I'm going to go ahead and say that Yolanda had already addressed that.
Okay, I appreciate it. Appreciate all you do too as well, Tom. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Did I miss any of my colleagues? Okay. I just wanted to thank also Mrs. Gabriel to address some of the items that you shared. There has been discussion between the superintendent and I too, because in some instances, like Mr. Mendiola was sharing, that the child can be able to act independently without the assistance of a one-to-one aide. And so many times I understand the complexities of an IEP and also the legal ramification it holds. And so many times what we don't speak about is the pressures that the principals face at their level when the parents demand a one-to-one aid. And in many times, perhaps the IEP shows that the child can act independently. And so I asked if there was a way that we can look and reevaluate the IEP, like some states are doing, to see how we can free up these one-to-one aides to assist other children and promote the children that are that progress forward to be able to interact independently within the school environment. We do want to address including ABA services into a child's IEP, if that is even, and to see avenues on how to make that possible. And I think the chairwoman, Mrs. Gutierrez, will agree with me when we say that no is never an answer. There's always a solution. And so my grandmother would always tell me that, and I know Mrs. Gutierrez and we discussed that yesterday. And so I think that we can find a solution forward. I would like to give perhaps another round of my colleagues to ask questions, and then we will move forward with other items on the agenda. Speaker Barnes, are you there? Okay. Senator Perez, do you have another question?
I am. I apologize.
Okay, Speaker, go ahead.
I'm still here. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the questions I wanted to ask, you kind of touched a point about the services and making sure, because as we look at the services being provided for these students, how many times a week is consulting or counseling provided? Because I'm getting a sense that a lot of things fall on the teachers and the aides. Is that a correct statement to say? And I'm going to open this to any of the professionals that are there, at least from DOE, because I know that if I'm looking at wanting to push some kind of partnership, I want to see where there are shortfalls that could be lifted and where I can look for the resources. So anybody from DOE. I want to support DOE because that is the nature of policy as it relates to providing for the best education.
Thank you, Speaker Barnes. With reference to the need for certain specialized services like counseling, it's identified again in the plan of the students, the Individualized Education Plan. So it will range to a certain time frame. Sometimes it wouldn't be as specialized from a division personnel, but it could be in the school site that could be carried out by the respective school guidance counselor. So I made mention earlier in the early stage of the meeting that for the emotional disability students, we have a small group of previous year. However, upon return of students,
Madam Chair, can't hear. So sorry.
Ms.
I
Gabriel,
lost.
can you speak again?
Okay, so going back to our initial discussion earlier, that number of students providing in need of counseling program may not be only solely under the special support from the Division of Special Ed. From some counseling needs, and I think Ms. Nadine Sebeda could also add on this one, that we also tap on the individual counselors in the schools to provide the counseling support. Now, if this would be a unique need of the child, it would be included in the IEP, and the team will make a decision or recommendation, the frequency and the duration of the service. But you're right, Speaker Barnes, that we may be faced with a lot of need and support for the opening of the school year, notwithstanding that when we assess the child on the state where they are in right now, there may be a deluge or a lot of need to support a number of students to address their social emotional need. Ms. Payne, would you like to add some more for district-wide?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Yolanda. So we are providing supports currently to people who are getting school-based mental health or school-based behavioral services. And so we are going to do a lot of training with our 12-month employees. And we're also going to train our school counselors to provide screeners, if anything, that will determine if they're low to medium. And if that's the case, the school counselors can provide support, supportive counseling, and if it's high, medium to high, then they will then go to a specialized, more licensed practitioners, or people who are in the school-based behavioral health, or they can be referred back to Guam Behavioral Health, because we are doing stuff in collaboration. We do provide 5 fact sheets and I'm talking very general in the district-wide. There are 5, if you look at the research with COVID-19, there are 5 areas that are related, mental health related topics, and that's on stress or distress, loss and grief, trauma, anxiety, and depression. And so we created a fact sheet that will be provided to students, would be age appropriate to middle and high school, to their parents, and then even we want to provide support to our DOE personnel. And so if we're talking about support for our students, that's going to be open to everybody. We're going to have those flyers and fact sheets available, and then training will be occurring in July. And then if needed for services, then we can provide that to them.
So in as far as the physical and the occupational and the speech therapy, are those consistently given to the students, or does it work with its IDEA program, and how many times does it get given on a reasonable basis? Maybe that's the further question I want to ask.
Thank you, Speaker. In reference to speech therapy, during the previous year, all students were able to receive services, and the range of services would be a minimum of, say, 30 minutes weekly, and it varies again. So the school team identifies the range and duration of the services for speech. With reference to physical therapy, we are able to provide the support. What we are challenged right now is with the occupational therapies because of a position hard to fill, in as much as we have an on-site, but the person is leaving us again sometime in July. We are also accessing possible online support, but we have also come to understand that not all students can respond directly to an online support, but there is a greater need for a face-to-face. So aside from that, we are proactive in establishing contracts from private vendors within the island that can continually support our students that in need of OT. So right now, OT would be our challenge within the division.
Yeah, okay. So thank you, Madam Chair. That is one of the reasons why I asked that question, is because I want to look at the resources that would be needed if we had to step out, or we had to look at those kind of private-public partnerships that could be utilized by working with others outside from the government perspective. And what I wanted to know was the impacts as it relates to the salary, and what I mean, not the salary, but the resources that were needed to run these programs. So maybe what we can do is I can further detail what possibilities that we could work with, and if the challenges of resources or the demand of the expertise that is needed, then we should do some kind of call out and work from there. And maybe I can work with you further. And I know I'm limited on time, so and I've got a couple other questions, but I promise I'll get back to you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker. Forgive me, Ms. Westling. I was just reminded that you had something to bring to the table. You'd like to make some comment on something. So please go ahead and speak. And then Senator Torres, I'll call you right after. Just go ahead and unmute your
say is this. I am a teacher. I am a consultant resource technical assistant for the Division of Education under the Autism Spectrum Disorder. And I wanted to tell you that I've been doing this for the past 20 years, and that the Department of Education has a viable and a great autism program for our students out in the community. And I say this very sternly because I'm not just talking about the individuals who are in my department alone, but I am talking about the Department of Education and every teacher that is out there that is working with all of the students who we love that are under autism spectrum disorders and any kind of disorder. We have been training our teachers for the past 20 years, and at the very beginning, we only had 69 students with autism. We now, of course, now have 245. In those numbers, what we do is, as my job, we go out and we train the individuals. I have had training in the areas of TEACH, which is the treatment and education of autistic children and other communication handicaps. DOE sent me to this training, and they have sent other individuals to this training. We have also have training in the area of picture exchange communication system. We have training in discrete trial training and in autism and in ABA also. But I think it's important to know, and the senators need to know, that there's two types of, there's one ABA, but there's two school of thoughts. One is the educational side and one is the medical side. Now on the medical side, it's a clinical to where it's one-to-one with the student. On the educational side, what we do is we train the teachers in order to work with the individual, not only in a small group setting, but we also try to train them to work in the whole group setting. So therefore, each and every teacher is learning how to work with students with ASD. Now, I agree that we can use some training or some more training. I don't disagree with that. I just want everyone to know that the teachers that are out there that are working with their students are working very hard and they're doing the best they can. And that we have had a program for the past 20 years. It's evolving. And to say we do not have one is not truth. And so I just also want to say that we work with every child that comes through the door. And the problem is when the child does not come to school, we cannot service them. And so I just want to make sure that people understand that we want to be in collaboration with the parents and with any organization that is going to help the students. So please, if this is going to help, great. But please don't say that the educational system does not have a program, because we have had a program for the past 20 years. And I'm evident of that. And so are all those teachers out there who have been teaching those students with autism spectrum disorder. And as far as the ABA, every teacher on Guam for the past, if you were here 3 years ago, where we started doing direct instruction is part of ABA. What it is you give an instruction, you wait for the feedback, and you basically give them, you wait for the child's, sorry, I'm a little nervous, but what it is you give an instruction, you wait for the child's response, and you give a feedback. It also includes prompts, and it also includes reinforcers. And every child is different, so you have to know the child. And as for all the questions about how much time do we give for each student, every student is different. And the team, the instructional team, which is the parent, the teachers, and the service providers, all of those are the people who determine how much time each child gets. So it's really an educational team, including the parents, that agree to what the IEP states. So we can't say it's just 1 hour or 2 hour. It depends on each and every child. That's why it's individual. So I hope that answers your questions. And I just wanted you to thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Westling. Senator Torres, do you have any questions or comments?
No, Madam Chair, just proceed. There's a lot of people that have things to say. That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Torres. Senator Perez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so I am just have a question regarding child study teams. Is this something that can be utilized more within GDOE as far as perhaps addressing some of the needs prior to becoming part of the special needs program? Sorry if I can have a two-part question. It's totally unrelated though. Is there a program that allows for advocates to be a part of the IEP meeting?
Yes. Yes.
So for the first question, Senator Perez, your question, I'm sorry, just kind of, the second question was the one that kind of better. Maybe I'll start with the second question. Regarding with the advocates, if there would be a parent advocate or a child advocate, student advocate who would like to participate in the IEP meeting, they are welcome to do so, and all they have to do is just inform the school team. We listen to whatever input that they have in consideration for the child and what would work best with the child. And with regards to your first question, Senator, I just would like to get it a lot clearer. Can you please repeat it, ma'am?
So yeah, there's a position called the CST, Child Study Team. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
The child study team, which is kind of, somewhat has a distinct responsibility and it's not within the parameters of special education. So with that particular team, a team of the child's teacher, sometimes the school guidance counselor, an administrator, the parent would be coming up and sitting at the table and evaluate or make an assessment on the needs of the student. But prior to that, there should be a record of what were the interventions that were set in place in order to address the needs of the child. So it's not yet truly under the parameter of the special education, because when the child study team had kind of established that there should be a need of specialized design instruction, and the child has a disability, then it moves forward, and referral for assessment is being done. So the child study team is somewhat have a role in identifying, number one, if the child is somewhat suspected of having a disability, and number two, if there's a need of specialized instruction. Within the child study team, there's also the determination if, for example, it was established that the child has a disability, but it's not in need of a specially designed instruction. So it becomes a 504 case, to which it falls under the support of our Student Services Division. And in the 504, similar to an IEP, there would be a 504 plan to kind of support the child or the student. I hope that answers my question, the question.
Sorry, actually, thank you for that clarification, but I was wondering, do you think we need to expand that program a little bit more, the CST?
If I could answer that, Senator Paris, this is Dr. Sokola. I just want to say that the child study team is the first part of a process, and it could start with any reason why we need to call a team together to be able to look at a student's situation. The parent can ask for the child study team, the teacher can ask for it, the counselor can ask for it. We get together as a team to start this process to look at any reason why we need to address a student's concern. And so a child study team does not necessarily end up, as Ms. Gabriel said, referring to special ed. We're going to start a child study team to be able to address any kind of concerns that anyone has, whether it's behavioral concerns. In our child study teams, many times we come up with behavioral intervention plans that we have that take place in the classroom, that take place in the school, and we usually invite staff members as well as administrators to be able to have this broad spectrum perspective of how we can help the student. And so that's what a child study team does. And anyone can call it, and the schools utilize it from elementary, middle, and high school throughout the whole process of the educational system for the kid. So, and it is a very important process. So I hope that kind of gives a better perspective of how we utilize child study teams.
Yes, thank you for that. I just wanted to know if we need to expand that program, you feel. Is there a need to expand it more?
I'm not necessarily sure that we need to expand it. I think that it is being utilized and it is very effective in the school system.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Perez. Senator Terlahi, do you have any questions?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. Just I'll try to be quick. Attorney Summer Fleck, can you just clarify? So you said that 20 years ago, GDOE did have a specific contract for services. I think you said ABA services for autistic children, but they don't have that particular contract right now. And then we heard Ms. Wessling, thank you for testifying today, talk about how they have been trained and over the years or recently, and in particular ABA strategies and other strategies. And I have heard from parents that they are very satisfied with, their children's progress under GDOE's current strategies. But I do hear, what several of you have said, that there is a particular strategy that we could employ on Guam that we believe, or that according to, as you say, the science could also help if it was done more or in a certain way. So I guess I want to ask you, and then of course Mrs. Gabriel said that ABA can be incorporated as a mandate in the IEP, right? And so it's not that it's being denied, I guess, but who makes that ultimate decision whether it's denied, first of all, versus included in an IEP, and who makes the decision as to what type of ABA services will be provided or will be, the students can avail of? If I think what Dr. Duenas has described is a, specific ABA program designed, with the experts, his experts, and you know, but I'm sure there are others. So I don't know, Mr. Attorney Summerfleck, if you could weigh in on this. What am I understanding this correctly?
I think I'm unmuted. Here's what I would opine, that 20 years ago or more, we brought in a specialist, Dr. Norell. She implemented, prior to what's gone on in the last 20 years, where ABA has registered technicians and registered behavioralists. At that time, Guam brought in Cynthia Norell. Cynthia Norell developed an ABA discrete trial program. It was implemented system-wide. There were specially trained individuals who worked as the one-to-one aides, and they went through a week training during the summer, direct hands-on, working with autistic children, showing their competency. There was also the equivalent of a BCBA, Jennifer Cruz. Now she's in Japan and she's Dr. Cruz. And they implemented an ABA format program, focusing on providing qualified individuals, providing the service. Time progressed, ABA developed farther. You now have national certification. We don't have, as far as I know, and anyone can correct me, anyone certified within the DOE system that meets the credentials for ABA. We don't have the RBTs, which is a credentialed program. So to say that we're implementing ABA, maybe there's some ABA light being implemented, but how do you implement an evidence-based behavior program if you don't have anyone certified to implement it? So that's the changeover that has occurred over the past 20 years. When Dr. Norell first came out here, there wasn't national certification. Dr. Norell certified the techs. Dr. Norell certified the BCs. 20 years now later, nationally, there's certification programs for basically the RBTs. There's the national certification program for the BCBs. That is the key difference here. And if anyone's going to say we have an ABA program, if you don't have certified individuals, then you have some light program. And that's, I think, the major difference. How well is the program credentialed? How well are the people implementing the program credentialed? If they're a high school graduate, went through 1 day of training, is that the credentials that's expected for the Department of Education to be an RBT? As compared to taking a national certification course, having some reliability that you've been observed actually working with children, and receiving credentialing. In the past, when Dr. Norell was out here, there were individuals that were suggested to be one-to-one aides. They didn't meet the standard. Their behavior was perhaps not appropriate. They weren't able to work with the students appropriately. Currently, my understanding, and anyone again can correct me if I'm wrong, it's a one-day class. There's no reliability. I forget the scientific term for it, but I would say that observation, making sure that the individual is able to perform the task that they're assigned to. On top of which, the BCBA is someone who actually develops the behavior interventions. Again, a credentialed program. Somewhere where there's national certification. That doesn't exist in the Department of Education. I'm not aware of anyone working with our children with autism that have any national credentials. And even if we had an RBT that was credentialed, they couldn't practice because they're not under the supervision of a BCBA. It's a two-part system. A BCBA develops the strategies. The RBT is the implementer of the strategies. If we have no one who's certified in either one of those categories, it's kind of like going, excuse me, Dr. Blaine, it's going to a doctor that doesn't have any medical training. And I guess that's what I would respond to.
Senator, may I speak to that? I'm not certified with the BCBA, but I have a teacher credential. I have a master's in education, in special education and in elementary education. And there are many teachers on Guam that have a certification in education. What he's talking about is a medical certification for BCBA. We need to understand the difference. They're trying to bring on a medical BCBA into an educational system. And the people who are able to do direct instruction, which is every teacher on Guam, is able to go ahead and produce the ABA system. Now, it might not be in a pure system, but it is in a pure system as far as education is concerned. So I want to really have the team understand that we are talking two different elements here, one for education and one for the medical practice. And I don't go into the medical practice and tell them what they need to do. I would like us to just do what we need to do in the educational practice. And yes, we can use more training, but I think we need to understand that we've been training our teachers for 20 years. We train them every month, 60 teachers at a time for 2 days in order to go over the strategies that are working for students, that are best practices for students with autism spectrum disorders. And then with those best practices, we go out into the field and we work with those teachers and the students individually to see what the concerns are. What can we do to help? And if the student doesn't come to school, we cannot help them. So I just need to say that we are applying specific research-based applied behavior analysis techniques when we teach.
I appreciate that. That's my understanding, and so that's why I have heard that, you know, some parents are very satisfied. Some parents, I mean, I just want to ask you, Ms. Gabriel, is there, I don't know, I see it like, you know, I'm sorry, I'm not an educator, so forgive me if this is really way off, but I really see it like, you know, the dispute we have regarding curriculum. What type of reading curriculum different schools want to follow? Some people swear this is the best one, this is the only one, and this is what we should all do, versus, you know, the other schools, or the parents, you know, saying, no, we don't like this is junk. But I just think, so I know everyone is trying their best, but I just want to know, is there anything that prevents the Department of Education from using its federal funds to either just to pursue that other, I don't know, if we're not going to get a BCBA here, but if we could at least just pursue that, we are, you know, doing our best to get that type of training for all those people. And like you said, it evolves. So maybe, you know, this is just the evolution, and I don't know, but I think it's worth a try, or at least a look. And if they're doing it in other schools across the nation, and they found a way to blend, you know, all the education experience and years, and you know, use what has evolved, a science side, if we could do that. And I just wonder, I think the issue, you know, because I'm hearing about a contract that happened 20 years ago, is when you say that you are allowing ABA in your IEPs, are are they allowed to get a specific provider, or are you talking about the ABA that Ms. Westling is describing by teachers?
Thank you, Senator Terlahi. Maybe this also kind of the information that I would like to share with you, and maybe Ms. Westling could attest to this one, because I'm just on my 9th year with the Division of Special Ed, even though I am with the Department of Education for 24 years now, okay? So 20 years ago, the way it goes on providing level of support to students would be a specific number of students only. So the level of support was only confined to whatever the plan was made and decided on. When I came in 2011 and kind of review on how certain group of students only and a certain group of teachers only and only specific schools are benefiting from this consultant, we kind of had a plan on how we are going to build capacity within the Guam Department of Education. So starting school year 2012, the professional development was not only confined to division personnel who specialize on certain disability group, or confined to certain schools only to support only specific students, but we had the wide scale and all schools were included in the training process. And an add-on on that one is we established our parent support for providing them some workshop and training. So every time we have a consultant comes in, there would be a support for division personnel folks, to us teachers in the school system, administrators, and there is a must that there should be a parent component. So asking, will there be a possibility on how we're able to build capacity on this growing need of the students? Absolutely, Senator Terlahi. The department is currently pursuing some sort of a support wherein we're able to build capacity, and on the latter process, maybe a possibility on how we are able to have our existing personnel meet certification requirements. Just to let you know, currently, the Guam Allied Health does not have a licensing for the BCBAs. All the licensed BCBAs come from different states. And true, it's a new profession and a new licensing medium that Guam will eventually have to adopt later on. So my stance on this, yes, we are going to continue to try to build our capacity. I'm pleased to have the likes of Mrs. Westling, who continually have supported, our students with special needs under the autism spectrum, and who is through a testimony that things have changed and how research goes. Before, everything is sheltered. This type of students are sheltered away from their peers, receiving instruction differently. Now, the reason why we have an increase of number of 1-to-1 aid is because we have these students that are participating with their peers. And we have a data too that will suffice that most of our autism students participate in the general education for the most part, and a larger part would be having only one or with no resource classroom. So what we're trying to say here is we are kind of, successful in having a follow-up inclusion practices, that they are part of the general population, but with the necessary supports. That's a given already because of their disability. Right now, we don't have a lot of these students in a sheltered environment. We want them in a social learning environment within their peers so that they are able to learn their coping skills and social skills, as well as part of accessing their education. Thank you, Senator Terlahi.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate, all the experience that has gone into, taking care of the children and adopting to all the evolution in all of your practices. I know it's probably been very dramatic over the years. So I do appreciate that. I guess I'll just leave this with you, Mr. Superintendent, and the board, that if, for children, we all know that days count. A year is a very long time in this type of situation, I think for children with the autism spectrum disorder, that a year makes a huge difference. So I would just like to encourage that if it's something that you can look at as to whether we can just evolve our this particular training, since it's being proposed, take a look at it. As you look at your curriculum every year and you're able to shift it that quickly, I know you take years to study it, but still, the changes are pretty dramatic sometimes. And so maybe I'm just saying, and if we can help to focus to get the additional training, we can do that. But if the federal funds can do that, then I say, let's just at least take a look at it and try to focus them that way. If we can get these students to be, I'm also hoping we can look at the as Ms. Paulino talked about, the pre-school functions, so that that is more effective for everyone when they actually are in the schools. But I know it's a process, but I have a lot of faith in you that you can, if you focused on it, really, make some dramatic changes. Thank you. Mr. Fernandez, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I like I said before, we do have a work session that will be set up. I believe it's already being set up to go over these issues at the board level, because I do appreciate your line of questioning, because I think it lays out the two issues we're talking about. One is service delivery. And I think when we talk about service delivery, we talk about the IEP process and what is requested as part of that process. I know Dr. Duenas mentioned that because of the newness of this therapy on Guam, that it might not be as prevalent in the IEP process, because perhaps not many either school professionals or parents are familiar with it or experienced with it, and that may just be a function of additional awareness that needs to be spread, right? So that's one thing. So that as the IEP process moves forward, and these therapies are discussed and perhaps requested, and what Ms. Gabriel is saying is that nothing prevents us from providing and then building capacity to be able to meet those requests. But as far as the service delivery goes, it's almost a function of demand. As more people get awareness and begin to request and discuss and recommend these services, then that's one way to drive this. The other side of it is what you were asking around the policy issue. Really, is it a policy matter of determining, whether it's at the legislative level or at the board level, that these are things, this is a line of services that ought to be pursued and researched and further considered as a policy matter? That's a different question that does require research and discussion at the policy level. So I think at the work session that's being set up, we will evaluate this situation both from the service and the policy level, and then also an opportunity to hear more directly from Hunter Speaks about Dr. Duenas about their proposal to assist with building capacity. So I think if we take it from that level, we'll be able to get a better clarity on where things are and where things can head. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm so very grateful to all of you for your dedication and your service to Tusmasi. Thank you, Ms. Mann.
Thank you, Senator Chalahi. Just to do a quick recap, the items that we discussed for the work session is a possibility of a public-private partnership to address some of these issues. Also to understand what we would qualify and quantify as appropriate education, the possibility of moving forward with classifications of one-to-one aids, and seeing what can be done to adjust the IEP models to free up some of the aids as the students progress into higher levels of secondary education. We'd also like to see if there's incentives for special ed teachers and ED teachers. Also provide them with training opportunities annually at the least, to see if possibilities of including ABA services, and to discuss the possibility of utilizing BCBAs and RBTs. I just want to say one thing, it's very difficult as a teacher when there's always a shift in things. And so I don't anticipate us shifting, these huge goals within a year. If we can come up with a small pilot program, incentivize teachers to be a part of this program and move it forward slowly, I think that would be a feasible way that we can address the needs of the students. I do not want to burden our teachers with these huge goals immediately. I don't want them to drink through a fire hose. This is not the intent of this roundtable. The intent is to see how we can improve the education services for those with disabilities, and see how we can incentivize our teachers to retain them and to keep their expertise, and how we can ensure that our one-to-one aides are a constant presence in their continuing education for the children. And so, I'd like to thank the superintendent, the Board of Education, and Dr. Sekola. Thank you for the tremendous amount of work that you've been doing on your end. You're going to retire soon, so you'll be sorely missed. Please keep into account the demands of the teachers and the one-to-one aides and the principals as you do these work sessions. And please try to move forward if we can move something in a pilot phase and not just require the teachers to completely transition in an immediate fashion. I think that would be very unreasonable. It would not only hinder their ability to teach and service the children better, but also well. So I'm hoping, if it's a possibility, Mr. Superintendent, that we can come back at the last week of July and see what the work session has brought forward, and if we can continue these discussions as the school year moves forward, if that's a possibility. And we still have one more item on the agenda, but we do have a budget hearing at 1 p.m. So I'd like for us to recess until 5 p.m. today and come back to discuss the second piece of our agenda, which is the general discussion for summer school program and curriculum and the school year of 2020 and 21 and the impacts of COVID and our upcoming school environment. So we'll recess today at 5 p.m., recess until 5 p.m. today, and we will come back and discuss those items on our agenda. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Superintendent, the board, and everyone here today for their testimonies. Thank you, Dr. Duenas, Attorney Summerfleck, and Camille, and also to your wife, Mrs. Duenas, for providing testimony. So yes, I'll see those that will be present this afternoon for 5 p.m. to discuss that second agenda. And thank you, GDOE, for your flexibility to allowing us that later time in the day today to adjust our schedule. I appreciate all your hard work. The Committee on Education, Air Transportation, and Statistics Research and Planning will now recess this virtual hearing until 5 p.m. today. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon. God bless. Bye-bye.